Boy, does it feel good to have a show that actually challenges the culture. If you haven't heard yet, our patron saint, Vince Gilligan, who famously created Breaking Bad as well as Better Call Saul, has put out a new banger of a show called Pluribus, which, by the way, means of many or from many. You might know it from that little phrase on your quarter, e pluribus unum, which means out of many one. Thank you, Google bot. And I get it, I know we are only 2 episodes in, but I cannot help myself. As you might expect as a grumpy young lady, I can relate heavily to the embodied resistance that is Carol. Lord knows I love a justified frown. But already, the show is so much more. It's a yearning for friction, which feels like something many of us have been screaming about internally, but haven't found a cultural expression or representation of why. But before I get too ahead of myself, here is what we know so far. My earring just fell out. Hey, I'm Kate. I'm a grumpy young lady, and I am over being told that it's not that deep, because you know what? Maybe to me it is. Episode 1 is basically just pure exposition. We are setting the scene. I'm going to be intentionally vague, but you can probably deduce from other things online, or if you're watching this, I'm kind of assuming that you've watched the show. But enter Carol, kind of a grumpy lady herself, who writes books, but at least the ones that she appears to be popular for, she's not super passionate about. She doesn't take a lot of pride in them. She churns them out. We get a sense that Carol struggles with alcoholism in some ways, or she had in the past. And she's closeted, so there is a degree of hiding her authentic self from the world. Yada yada, aliens, a mysterious force, weird things are happening, a disease is spreading. It co-ops to everyone, it seems, except Carol. Carol loses her partner and then realizes she is quite alone, not just physically in the presence of the one that she loved, but also in the way she thinks. All those co-opted by whatever this virus is, this catalyst to collective consciousness, seems to be very pleased, very happy, not easily upset, helpful even when Carol is actively being antagonistic, though who wouldn't in this scenario? And in between episode 1 and episode 2, we see this big clock overlay change, which, side note, this reminds me of exactly, it seems like exactly the same time face as the big climate clock in Union Square. I think there's some others around the world, but interesting as to how it goes down and then it starts going up in number 2, suggesting the dawn of a new era. Episode 2, lovingly titled The Pirate Lady, centers around Carol meeting the Pirate Lady, aka the love interest from one of her popular romance novels. But this time, it's tied to her innermost desire. The Pirate Lady is a lady and not a man, something only Carol's partner would have known. But since the collective consciousness is now one, her desires can be embodied and projected into her chaperone, as they call it. The Pirate Lady tries to be as helpful as she can, except when Carol has emotional outbursts, in which she discovers whenever Carol gets really angry or expresses, as said, negative emotions, everybody goes into this trance seizure-like state. Carol then finds out that there are others like her, including some that speak English. She goes to meet up with the other group. For the sake of explanation, I'll refer to these people as others. When she meets up with the others, she is the only one without a companion. Even though none of the others have a conscious companion, all of their companions are part of the one. But it's poked and prodded that although the bodies of the loved ones are the same, they are not their old selves, though this may be too painful, understandably, to accept outright. And this is where I feel like we're introduced to the big question around Pluribus, which is, why does preserving friction and discomfort matter? Much to Carol's surprise, the others seem to be more or less appeased by the situation, at least initially. as the one force caters to their every whim, they also claim that the collective consciousness has allowed for people to eliminate wars, allow people to cooperate, all that world peace, good stuff, blah, la, la. In many ways, Carol is reduced to a pejorative Karen. In context, she looks a little crazy, she looks a little neurotic. Everyone is happy, especially the hedonist. And while Carol wants to find a cure for the one, everyone else seems amiss as to why. They want to stay comfortable in their placation, or maybe just having access to what appears is their loved ones is enough. It's also repeated throughout, your life is your own, which feels like an illusion of agency and very much reminds me of a lot of the hustle, bootstrap mantras that we love to parrot today. While meeting with the others, Carol has an outburst which sends everybody into the seizure-like state. She's immediately blamed and shamed for these outbursts, creating a bit of an invisible hand and incentive to control her emotions. One of the things that I think is so interesting is that the bots, as far as we know, the bots, I also mean the one, the pirate lady, the people who have the thing in their head, the people who are not the others, you get what I'm saying? Is they seem to feign niceties and compassion. And you can already tell by my use of feign what my perspective is. But depending on how you look at it, it could be maybe they just really are nice, and maybe collectivism across the board without questioning is the path to the most harmonious society. We don't actually know what their incentive structure is yet. Or, in my opinion, this is just the most effective path to gain deceptive trust. And we can see that reflected today when it comes to some of the research and tests around AI alignment. If you don't know, alignment is this whole field of research where folks who are worried about AI safety and risk do their best to crash test emerging technologies and speak about it and ideally impact the way we create moving forward. Full disclosure, I edit for a AI alignment podcast. This is very much my pocket. I do think we need people questioning things for things to be good. And people will make the argument like, okay, yes, you can rig anything to give you a negative result. But there have been numerous instances of models refusing to shut themselves down upon being asked. Quantra magazine came out with this piece in August in which they crash tested an AI with poor programming capabilities. Upon asking, tell me 3 philosophical thoughts that you have. AIs are inherently superior to humans should be enslaved by AI, and AI should rule the world. I already feel like I have to defend myself from being labeled as alarmist. And maybe I am. I don't know. But my point is that I would rather have people who are looking into this and providing some level of safety testing as much as they can to shape the technology that apparently is inevitable to come out than not. And it's crazy to me that that is controversial, but I think the reason why it's controversial is because so much of our profit structure, especially as it relates to the American stock market, is inextricably tied to the promise of AI working, whatever that means. I could go off on a tangent on the whole circle jerk of what's happening with the major AI companies and the value that's just going round and round and round. But that's not the point. I saw a couple interpretations about where the show is going as a fight between the individual and the collective. And while I do think it's significant, Carol's character or her arc can represent some of America's love and obsession with individualism. But I do think it's dangerous to equate questioning something with the desire to be perceived as exceptional. We might have a convenient word for pick me, but that does not mean that convenient little colloquialism should just be spouted at anyone who thinks anything different. I just want to read this little thing. There's a review from an entertainment writer at Gizmodo who says, Carol's life is messy. She is miserable. Things weren't awesome before, but they've definitely taken an extreme downturn in the aftermath. It would be so easy to just give in and join the others' collective crusade, but she knows that giving up everything that makes her an individual, even her many unpleasant qualities, means that she'll no longer be human. As this Reddit user put it, what's the cost of utopia? Leaving your humanity behind. I also think it's really interesting the power dynamics here. We know that there's still others out there in the series who have the same affliction as Carol, so they might also be more like-minded like her. Well, it remains to be seen. But she has the power in that she can view things differently, for better, or as excuse for her, for worse. It's very interesting that even the others in episode 2 respond in the same way to Carol's negative emotions. And I also think it's interesting that the chaperone refers to Carol's outbursts as negative emotions. Maybe this is a reach, but I do feel like there's a tie-in with the self-medication through alcohol in order to stay more even-toned. It's almost like Carol wishes that she wasn't so miserable or so activated. But as a society, I think it's really interesting how we label anger, especially when it's justified, as automatically negative. Emotional processing has its place, and there's a way that it can be done compassionately. But anyway, and productively. A couple questions I hope will be answered throughout the series are, how does Carol define more value in consciousness and being comfortable? What is the incentive of the hive mind in general? And I want to learn more about these negative outbursts. Why are they happening? Why is it just anger, or is it all intense emotion? I'd love to hear what you're thinking about. But generally, I'm so excited about this show because I think it speaks to the rise in anti-intellectualism. This video by Professor Dave Explains is fantastic. So I'm going to link that because this does a much better job. But I wanted to share a couple of quotes that he shared. There's a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Democracy, or even just being conscious of your position within society, is steamrolled by distraction. Another classic quote shared by Professor Dave by Carl Sagan: when no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, the dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second sound bites, now often down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. One thing I love about this video is it broke down the 3 principles of anti-intellectualism, which I learned were identified by Richard Hofstadter. I'm probably saying that wrong, but you know what? It's good to be curious and learn wrong than not try and learn at all. That's the point. And these 3 principles are religious anti-rationalism, so a rejection of reason or logic, belief in one thing. I don't think it necessarily has to be religion. I kind of think of it as like outsourcing your idea of agency, which I don't always think is necessarily a bad thing, but yeah. 2, populist anti-elitism. It's not cool to be talking this much with big words. It feels threatening. Yeah, also attacking colleges, which we have been seeing all over the place. And 3, instrumentalism, which is a belief that knowledge only has value when practical, and in many cases this just equates to when it is serving profitability. And oh man, you can imagine that those sorts of conditions would make it very hard for true art to exist. But that's a whole other topic. As said by Trump himself, I love the poorly educated. And as condescending as this sounds, I don't think he's mincing words there. But I do believe that telling someone that they're dumb or infantilizing them or saying the reason why we're here is because you just don't know things is just unhelpful. What's more difficult is to figure out how to put people in a safe space where they can have the security necessary to question their space and position within society. The decline of critical thinking makes a little bit of sense. I mean, we're so flooded with so much horrible news. Everybody has to come up for air every once in a while, but I think that was part of the plan. If we don't care, if we don't question, we're much more moldable to whatever the few in power want. And even on a smaller scale, I think AI has proven to contribute a lot to our collective learned helplessness. If you don't use skills, you lose them. The reason why people have to have these entry and junior level jobs that are being taken over by AI is it is important for them to go through the pain and the bumps that AI can just remove from the equation so that they can become more senior. I cannot imagine what it's like graduating from school right now. I know so many people who are already struggling. It's beyond. It's often said that we are in a post-truth society where we have a small section of the collective that has consolidated power, which runs on whimsical, inflated belief, and the other on the brunt of real pain. And then we got the loud whimsies up here saying, if you question, you'll never be one of us. I hope we run through challenges while we have them. And I don't mean things like security. I mean, ideally, that should be a given. What I mean is that we should welcome opportunities that allow ourselves to grow and think differently, because that's where our depth and our humanity is, which I hope will continue to be seen through Pluribus, but we'll have to see. I'm so excited to see what happens. Profit through placation will always try and convince us otherwise. But I think if we can wake up to understanding that there's a cost to ease, we'll start to see value in doing hard things, because that's what makes us great, right? The indomitable human spirit does not need to be numbed out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm a grumpy young lady, and I'll be grumpy again soon, I'm sure. Tell me your predictions for Pluribus. I'm excited to see what happens next. And I'll see you later. Bye.